In the first day of 8.5, we were factoring when things were actually pretty nice. And what made them pretty nice was actually two things. First of all, we are leading in what we call a coefficient of 1. And we're still going to have that happening today, so that's nice. And what happened in 8.5a is we made sure we kept this last number always positive. And that was pretty helpful because yesterday when that c was positive, remember, in order to multiply these two last terms to get a positive, we know that they either have to both be positive or both be negative. And we decided that it was that middle term that helped us decide that. If the middle term was positive and the last term was positive, so basically everything was positive, this was our general format. We just had to figure out how to end it. Likewise, when it ended in a positive, just so you can see what I mean, like let's go like this. Let's say we had x squared minus 8x plus 15 versus this scenario, x squared plus 8x plus 15. In this scenario, when everything was positive, we know we factor into two pluses. Here, when I'm still ending in a positive, but the middle term is negative, what I know is two negatives multiply to equal a positive number and add up to a negative number. So think about it. What's going to happen today is we're going to have that c be negative, which means it's less than 0. So our general question is, how do I factor when that last number, that c, is negative? Yesterday, for all of them, we were ending it in a positive, and we said that that made it pretty doable because we just either did plus plus or minus minus. Well, let's think about what's going to happen today when we make that c negative. How is it that you can multiply two numbers and end up with a negative? Well, what that means is those numbers can't be the same sign. One or the other has to be negative. So today what's going to happen is we're going to be figuring out a little bit more work with the signs, the positive or negative parts today. So let's go and do a little practice. So again, we are going to be factoring. We're still going to have this be nice. So we still know that the only way we can unfoil and get x squared is to have our first terms be x and x. That has not changed today. But what I have done is I've ended it in a minus 15. What does that tell me? That tells me that my signs are opposite. One of them's positive and one of them's negative. Now again, I really just need to figure out what goes in those spots. And how do I decide that? Same way I did yesterday. I need two numbers, one positive and one negative, that when multiplied give me a negative 15. Here's my choices. I can choose 15 and 1, with one of them being negative, or I can choose 5 and 3, with one of them being negative. Remember, this term in the middle is the big determiner. It controls the selection of my answers here. Those are the possibilities. So what does C give me, or this last number? It gives me signs, and it also gives me candidates, or possible answers. But who's going to win? It's the pair of numbers that I can get a 2 out of, which is obviously 5 and 3. You just have to decide who's the negative one. Well, I will tell you that it's going to have to be the 3, because 5 plus negative 3 is 2. So we're going to have a minus 3 and a plus 5. And again, how could we check it? We would do first x squared, outside minus 3x, inside plus 5x, and last minus 15. And we'd combine that O and I and make sure we get ourselves right back to the original problem. So this again is called the factored form of the trinomial x squared plus 2x minus 15. Next, let's go do some more practice. Again, let's get our format or our structure down. Because my firsts give me n squared, I have to lead an n and n. I have sign analysis I'm going to do right now. This determines the signs that I put with these two factors on the bottom. Because I'm multiplying to equal a negative, that means I can't do this because that'll give me a positive when I multiply. Can't do that because that's going to give me a positive when I multiply. It means I need one positive and one negative in my factored form. Now I just need to decide what numbers go in these last slots. Well, this is first, outside, inside, last. So how do I multiply to equal 36? There's a lot of ways, unfortunately. I'm going to list them all. As you get better at these, the correct answer sometimes just you get it right away, but I'm going to list them all. Here's all the ways I can multiply to equal 36. 1 times 36 is always an option. It's even, so 2 goes into it 18 times. 3 goes into it, because I can just see it goes in 12 times, or because these digits add up to 9. And 3 goes into 9, that's a little trick for that. I know 4 goes into 36 9 times. 5 doesn't. And I know 6 goes in 6 times. So I have got 10 possible candidates. Now I go to the big middleman, because that number tells me which pair I'm going to select. I need to have a positive and a negative that add up to 9. There's no way I'm getting 9 out of these. No way I'm getting 9 out of these. This right here, I can certainly get a 9 out of 12 and 3 as long as the 3 is negative. And then there's no way to get a 9, no way to get a 9. So what I know is I need to have an n plus 12 and an n minus 3. And again, I could check that by foiling it. So notice we're not doing anything different than we did in 8.5a. All I'm doing is introducing the ending it. I'm just kind of messing with the signs a little bit, and I'm ending it with a negative now. So let's go through, and I'd suggest you pause this and you try B on your own, and then press play and see if you did it right. Again, the first term today lately hasn't given me any worries because there's no number out front yet. I know that the only way I can get c squared is to choose c times c. So I know my first terms in each part of my factored answer. I'm going to split this just to separate it. Has to be c times c. Now where I go right to the end of the train, and I go and I take a look at this sign. Because it's negative, it means I need to have a positive and a negative in my answer. Again, the big determiner is that middleman. It is the strongest one, because it will tell me which numbers to put in the missing slots. I know I need to multiply to equal 21. Unfortunately, there's only 2 ways to do that. I need the pair that I can get a 4 out of, and even more specifically, a negative 4 out of. No way. Now, with these 2 numbers, one of them needs to be negative. By the way, a little trick is that the sign of the middle number always goes with the larger factor. Let me repeat that. The sign of the middle number always goes with the larger of the 2 factors. Look up here, I'll show you in green. The sign of the middle number always goes with the larger of the 2 factors. All right, because the larger one needs to take it over. All right, so my 7 goes with my minus, and my 3 goes with my plus. So how could I check it? I simply FOIL. So let's summarize what we know about how we use the signs to help us out. So let's take a look. Here's our options from yesterday. When I have, and I'm just repeating, x squared, and technically it's ax squared, but ours has been a 1, but it's not going to be much longer. When I have everything being positive, that told me that I needed to break it into positive and positive. When my last term is positive, oops, sorry, I've got a little typo here, and my middle one is negative. That tells me that I still need to have the same signs to multiply. Two negatives make a positive and two positives multiply to make a positive. But the middle term is telling me that they need to both be negative. Now what we've done today is we have ended it with a negative c. Well, how do I multiply two numbers and have my answer be negative? I need to have one positive and one negative. All right? This is very important. The sign analysis, one of the biggest mistakes kids make on these is they make a sign error. So I'm going to have that. Let me see what I've got going here next. I'm going to go do a couple more of these. Maybe not all of them, but there's a lot on here. We're going to just grab a couple of those different scenarios. And let's just go right in here with number 2. I'm going to immediately look out front and know I need to lead in R times R. I go right to the back of the train and I do a little sign analysis. Because it's ending in a positive, that tells me either both positive or both negative. Because the middle is negative, that determines it. Now, I need to figure out what goes in those slots. All right? 42 gives me the candidates, and some people immediately go at 6 and 7. If you can find it right away, go ahead. If you can't, though, you have to start listing all the numbers you know that go into 42. So there is some speed in this by knowing your factors. If you don't, it can take kind of a long time. But keep in mind, I need to have them both be negative because they need to multiply to equal positive 42 and add up to negative 13. So I've got a minus 6 and a minus 7. Let's go look at number 5 with area of a rectangle. There's one like this on your test, by the way, where the rectangle is actually a cookie sheet. I know that the area of the rectangle is n squared minus 3n minus 28. And I want to know what are the possible dimensions of the rectangle. So I want to break it into its length times its width. And when I break something into multiplication, that's also known as factoring. So really, this is just asking me to factor n squared minus 3n minus 28. Let's go do that. Here's my process once again. I know I must lead in n's and n's. That's been determined for me quite easily by my first term. I then go look right here and I decide what my signs are going to be. They have to be one positive and one negative to multiply to equal a negative. Now I'm going to stay over here and get my candidates. What multiplies to equal 28? 2 and 14, 4 and 7, and the minute you write 4 and 7, you should go, aha, I can get a negative 3 out of those. And the sign goes with the larger factor. All right? And it's done, and it could be checked by foiling it. So down at the bottom, let's have you maybe try this one on your own. Pause and give it a try. What I would suggest you do is anytime you don't see that coefficient, kind of put it in there. So I'm going to blow number 8 up over here. It's x squared minus 1x minus 20. Let's begin. All right? How do I get x squared? X and x. It's easy. Can't get that wrong. Then what do? I have a process, and it's the same every time. I go decide my signs. I'm going to need one positive, one negative. Now I'm going to sit right here and get my possible candidates. 20 times 1 gives me a 20. 2 times 10. 4 times 5. There's my candidates that are running. Who's going to win? Whatever pair I can get a negative 1 out of. No way, no way. Sure, the sign goes with the larger of the two. So I have a minus 5 and a plus 4. And before I quit, because I know this will be the last one, I check my answers. X times x is x squared. Minus 5x on the outside. Plus 4x on the inside. And a minus 20 on the last. And when I combine those middle terms right there, I end up with x squared minus 1x minus 20, which is exactly what the original problem was. So the beauty of factoring is that you always know if your answer is right. You should never raise your hand and say, is this right? Because you can check it by foiling. So that's the end of the lesson, and you have a great day.